Oh, that's what I wanted to ask you, James. You mentioned on one application that immediately after the public hearing, we should rescind the subdivision approval that was never met.
Correct.
Would it be appropriate to do that before we actually have the hearing?
I don't think so.
Okay, just curious. Figured if,
No, I think that process states that we have to have a hearing to revoke too.
okay,
So I think definitely mention it in the opening stages, just so it's out there and into the record. But I think that, you know, same as waivers, same as, you know, anything else that's impacting approvals, I'd feel more comfortable if we did that at the end.
okay. Just double checking.
Yeah, and I think Linda said the applicant is planning to submit that letter. I haven't seen it. So I don't think it's going to be a big deal for anybody. But still want to make sure that they have had their chance to be heard on it and all of that.
Definitely. I gotta find that from.
I just spoke with Joe McCaffrey and he said he is coming to the meeting.
Okay,
So that'll give us
That'll give us 4.
4.
Joe's not in a butter to any of these, right? That was to
No,
one of the ones that we finished a month or 2 ago.
Think so.
I think so.
Okay.
I can't even. That was longer than a few months. Wasn't that Minnesali?
No,
True.
well, he was that one, but there was another one that coming up.
I
That,
thought one of the boundary line adjustments or something
Yes.
showed up as in a butter.
Yeah.
Uh-uh.
yes, but
But
I
that
don't
was
think it's
done.
one this month.
Yeah.
It's all right. All the months blur together.
We're already into like, week 4 or week 17 of March. So I don't even think it matters anymore.
Hey, Hal,
Yes.
the check in question
I'm
at
sorry.
the library, the check in question
Oh,
at the library
yeah.
has arrived.
Oh, good. Good. So story.
Thought you'd like that.
Yes, that's actually very good. Yeah.
I'm going to. Actually, I can do it this way. Might as well use the technology that we have. I had only somewhat board related. Well, it's board related, but not business of the board related. At one of the other meetings that I was hosting the other night, they have what I thought was a very good opening statement for COVID-19 emergency related. I just put the checklist in, but it's sort of hard to read. But essentially it's better language than I think we use. And I can't cut it, but I can I could send it out. if you wanted to take a look.
Sure. I feel like at this point, any language at all is just sort of meets minimum requirements. People sort of know the deal.
Yes,
But
but still, it's still good to have. I can't split up the PDF, so you're getting the board packet from SAU 15, but it's page 2.
there's nothing top secret in it, is there?
No, it's all public. I hosted it. Made sure that it was public.
My wife's school board got a right to know request from the paper for all of their emails on an ongoing basis prior to every meeting.
Just in general, all the emails.
Yes, every email sent to the board members.
It's a little broad.
Even the hi, how are you ones?
Yeah, they should give them everything in their spam folders too.
Yeah, really.
They said everything.
Well, don't. I can tell you a war story that there was a district that I know of who received a right to know request for all emails on one particular student who had been there from preschool to graduation. This person spent, according to her, 3.5 days and 1,600 pages printing them out because they didn't have at the time a data retention policy that expired, so they kept everything.
Yep.
And after doing all this, the person never came to pick it up.
Yeah, Ben Frost from New Hampshire Housing Finance, who does a lot of the legal update kind of trainings, told a story about a request that they got that was like binders and binders and binders, enough to cover an entire table worth of records. And you're not allowed to charge
Correct.
for these except for any materials that are necessary to transfer. So they could have charged them for all the copies if they took them. The people that made the request brought their portable scanner and they scanned in every sheet, and they didn't take a single sheet out of the room.
That's rude. Ugh.
And then some.
And I believe that's Tim who's phoning in.
Tim, is that you on the 5463?
I'm here. I don't know about a 50. Yeah, 5463. Yes.
Then yeah, we have a quorum.
Yes, we do. Okay. Means I have to pull up the packet. Hang on. Okay. We will call the October 22nd, 2020 Town of Northwood Planning Board meeting to order at 7:09. We'll do verification of attendance. Chair Bob Strobel. And whoever wants to speak
Betty
next.
Smith,
Hal
Tim
Kreider,
Vandenberg,
Okay. Thank you. Voting designation is all members present. I believe we have one more on his way, and we can add him later. I'm going to try this out for size. I did send a copy to James, and it's pretty much the same, little more detailed version of what I normally read. Due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the planning board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen to this meeting using the phone numbers posted. And we have a technology or problem phone number, I believe. Is that right, Susan?
It's Susan's extension.
Okay.
No, it's,
Um,
no,
Is it not anymore?
no. I've been using my cell phone. It's
I
607.
would, can you hold up for a second?
Sure.
It would probably be best not to use a personal cell phone.
Right.
I'm sitting here and you can use my extension, which is beside me.
Okay.
Okay. Linda, when you call it out in a minute, if you had, during the meeting, you have any difficulty hearing the members of the school board or other technical problems that you cannot connect, you can call, go ahead, Linda.
603-942-5586, extension 2005.
Okay.
Bob, they're going to have trouble hearing the school board since we're the planning board.
Did I say school board? I'm
You
sorry.
did.
You
No.
did.
I meant to say planning board.
Yeah, I thought so.
I'm reading it from the school
Yeah.
board.
You got to substitute, Bob.
I'm usually about 4 words ahead. So, sorry. The phone number has, if you're having difficulty hearing the members of the planning board, you can call the phone number. I just said this last night, so that's why. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We've given public notice using to Zoom. It's been on the website and posted at Town Hall. Instructions are also on the website. We've provided a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access, and adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting, provided they phone in and notify us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. And we'll start the meeting by taking the roll call attendance, which you've already done. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during the meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So we have not done that latter part. So if you would want to restate your name and whether there's anyone in the room with you at the time. Chair Bob Strobel will know that I'm alone.
Hal Kreider and Irene Kreider's here.
Tim Vandenberg, no.
Betty Smith, Mike and Luigi the cat.
Oh, my dog's here too.
Okay, good to know.
Did we
Thank
get
you.
every- Did we go through this already? No.
Do we what?
No, go. Sorry,
Okay.
Bob.
That's okay. Anyway, there were just a couple things of difference between what we had done and what that has done, and I have a tendency to support that over what we had done in the past. So, okay. We have continued cases 18-13 and 19-20. And if I could pull that up, I believe we got a request, a couple pieces of information, including a request for continuance. If I can find that. Yes.
You're talking about Millstone?
Millstone, yes, October 21st, 2020. Dear Planning Board members, currently the two above applications are scheduled to be on the Planning Board agenda for October 22nd, 2020. I'm not going to be able to attend that meeting because of a family matter that arose today. I'm requesting that meeting be continued to the next earliest Planning Board meeting. I apologize for any inconvenience that this has caused, but it's not something that I can control at this time. Sincerely, Peter Holden. He did include 3 other pieces of information that we can review in that period of time.
One of which, Mr. Chair, is an extension or a request to extend the planning board hearing process through February if need be. So he is essentially giving us a letter for future continuances if we need it, but has specifically requested to be on the next meeting at this time.
Right. I think that slid off my email the last time I didn't see it. Okay, anyway, the applicant has requested a continuance to the next available meeting, which would be November. I gotta look it up.
The workshop would be November 12th. Otherwise, for internal business, we will also need to discuss tonight. Typically, instead of the 4th Thursday, we relocate the November meeting to the 3rd Thursday to avoid Thanksgiving. So assuming we change our schedule in that way, our meetings in November would be the 12th or the 19th.
Correct. Not knowing anything else, do we have anything else, or not knowing what we're going to get in November or before the November 2nd, do we have anything currently scheduled for the 12th? As far as
To
applications
my
go?
knowledge, we don't have anything scheduled for either of those meetings.
Okay.
I think that I think there are several cases in the new business that are going to move quickly. So I would advocate for putting those on the 12th. But yeah, if you're not concerned about how long those are going to take at that meeting, I don't see why we couldn't put something with a little bit more discussion on that agenda as well.
Yeah, Hal, go ahead.
Yeah, and we got some good information, I think, from the hydrologist. And I think it'd be worthwhile to discuss it sooner rather than later, because it may affect how we move forward on some of the other stuff. So even if it's just to review the information we got and formally discuss it, I think meeting on the 12th on that particular one would be a good idea.
And the 3 cases we would have typically on the 12th, we would open them tonight, potentially. We'd hear public comment, or any public comment on the 12th, and then begin our actions on them.
Right.
The bit of the concern is that if we hear DACO that evening, he would go first because it's a continued case. So that would push these back to the evening or later in the evening. We want to make sure we allow time to do that.
Bob,
Yes.
as far as the DACO application, that document you received was from someone who had provided that for Holden Engineering and Mr. DACO. I only received the information for the planning board's peer review 2 days ago. It was sent to our engineer. That hasn't even started yet.
Okay.
I don't have an escrow account set up, and they've been having a lot of problems with their email. And not our folks, but Holden Engineering, and they just recently sent it. It was 2 days ago, I believe. And so we haven't started that process at all.
Okay.
So the 19th might buy us a little bit of extra time to get
That's
that
what I'm
letter
thinking.
back.
And it's not like it's 2 weeks, it's only a week. My preference would be to continue the 19th, but I'm not making the motion.
Motion to continue case 18-13, 19-20 to the meeting the 19th of November.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. So motion by Ms. Betty Smith, second by Tim Jandeber. Mr. Tim Jandeber. Discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I still think it'd be good to discuss that letter earlier than later.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I would rather allocate time on the 19th for this whole case, rather than push the rest of them back.
The point I'm making on that is if there are things related to that we have specific questions about the person that's going to do the peer review, then we could theoretically be pushing this ultimately into November, from November into December. We said this was an important aspect. And while I normally wouldn't insist or, hope that we would get, feedback to the person doing the peer review for us, I'm just a little bit uncomfortable not doing that and having that discussion amongst ourselves first. So I really am opposed to this, but, it's a board, so.
Well, the other concern would be that if you don't have everything at the same time and you do go about it the way you're proposing, then it's going to be one review and then a second review, and it's going to actually end up prolonging it and possibly costing the applicant more time and money.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking just the opposite, but you have more experience, Linda, but I'm just worried that if we don't talk about it and then give some points, I mean, maybe I'm just too paranoid about it.
Well, so Hal, if, I think for an example, this board has requested the information from your engineer. And now that you have requested it, I would not suggest that you make a final decision on the case until you have received it back. So if that's not done in 2 weeks, we're going from, if it is done and the letter says the same thing that the applicant's letter says, you can feel pretty comfortable about a way going forward at the next meeting. If it's not done in 2 weeks and you're waiting for another meeting, you're going into December waiting to hear back from our engineer because they missed the first window when they might have hit if we gave them an extra week. And that's an extra meeting then that Mr. Daco needs to pay Holden Engineering to be at a meeting and all of that.
Yeah, help me out though, James. And maybe it's improper what I'm requesting, but if we wanted to make sure our peer review engineer looks at all the stuff that are of concern with us, is it proper for us to,
So you're asking,
yeah, that's what
you're asking about whether you should send more information to the town engineer for their consideration?
not more information from, Holden, but for example, there might be some things that where we say, well, let's see. Some folks ask more about the aquifer. Do we need more details from our engineer on that? And should we be requesting that? I mean, maybe I might be all wet on this, so speak up, but we raised it. This was one of the ones where we said, this is important. We're going to go get some extra help on this.
Mhm.
We got some information from the applicant, but if there's more emphasis or more information that we feel we need, I just want to make sure our peer review engineer does it right. So that's the reason I'm pushing it. If we have a general comfort level that the peer review engineer is going to do a thorough enough job and address all the points that, for example, Victoria brought up, then I'm fine. Let's just shoot for the 19th and see what we get and hope it's sufficient. But that's my concern.
Well, we have documentation of the board's comments. If we only got the request, if we got the information from Holden 2 days ago, the only other thing I can think of is to ask town staff when they forward the information on to the engineer to include
Yeah, okay.
like,
The draft minutes?
the draft
Yeah,
minutes.
that,
and
that
say,
would help.
here's the discussion that the
Yeah,
board had.
Yeah.
Here's the information from the applicant. Here's the board's discussion.
Make sure we cover these points.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Hal, and I
Yeah.
think
Victoria-
that
Victoria isn't
generally
here.
speaking, I would suggest trying to get as much of those or as many of those questions on the record in the initial request for the peer review,
Right.
so
right.
that there isn't a second meeting for
Right.
what other questions do we have. They
Right.
can just start as soon as the paperwork's in place.
And Victoria isn't
so-
here to defend herself or speak up, so I'm just trying to protect her.
Yeah,
interests a little bit.
we can share the minutes, and if they have any other questions, or if their stuff comes back and there are still questions, we would have to address them at that point. But
Okay.
that's something that you risk
Yeah.
anytime that
Right,
you have
right.
back and forth correspondence. So
Yeah, I'm only pushing this
Understood.
because it came up as relatively important. So I'm comfortable with the process.
Okay. So we had a motion and a second to continue to 1820 or whatever they are, 1813 and 1920 to November 19th. Further discussion on that? Hearing none, Susan will take a roll call vote.
Hal,
Yes,
Betty,
Yes,
Tim,
Yes,
and Bob.
Yes.
Oh,
And
so Joe McCaffrey just joined. I don't know if he can hear us though.
Joe
I can't hear
McCaffrey.
you.
Okay.
I've
Joe
been-
McCaffrey has joined us at 7:26 and is added to the voting designation. So we just continued the DACO case to the 19th of November.
That's fine.
So,
Humble apologies. I've been struggling with the internet. I had to switch a couple of times here. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
that's okay. We also have, next up is case 19-6, Joseph Carter Fatherland Family Trust. Have we heard anything from anyone on this one?
This one, as far as I'm aware, is still status quo.
Okay. And we're waiting to hear from DOT, is that correct?
Um,
I think he is.
I think he's waiting to hear from DOT.
I returned comments to DOT District 6. Realistically, we are waiting to hear from Mr. Carter that he's ready to come back for a meeting and move forward. But yes, all of that is also sort of dependent on the driveway permit process.
Okay.
Nobody can hear me anyway. I don't think.
We actually can.
We can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I will mute myself.
Thank you. Not a problem. Anyway, I believe we have an open and request for a continuance until we hear information back.
Until we receive the driveway permit.
Right, right. For 19-6. I'm just sort of curious. It's been 3 months, 4 months? Not pointing.
It's been a long time.
It has been a long time.
I don't believe I have spoken to Mr. Carter since the shutdown.
Yes.
The correspondence with District 6 did come at some point during that time frame. But yeah, this one has been
Okay.
going on for a bit.
What I'd suggest then, since the applicant doesn't seem to be in any hurry, and I would suggest we continue case 19-6 to first meeting in, well, why don't we do the 19th as well? November 19th. I was thinking of pushing it to December, but with my luck, we'll hear him, or he'll have something. So I would entertain a motion to continue case 19-6 to November 19th.
So moved.
Somebody want to try for a second? Okay, thank you. Motion by Betty Smith, second by Tim Jandeber to continue case 19-6 to November 19th. Discussion? Hearing none. Susan can do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Joe,
Yes,
Tim, Tim,
he seconded it. He's probably yes.
Well, you can't speak for him though. Tim?
You hear?
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
okay. Betty,
Yes.
Hal,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay. We also have next up is case 19-12, Michael Sullivan, Roma Joe's. We also have an outstanding request for continuance until the planning board is able to meet in person for this case. And I don't believe there is a representative of the applicant with us tonight.
There's a Michael S. That might be Mr. Sullivan.
Oh, yes. Yes. Thank you. Sorry.
Yes.
I confused it with someone else from my Zoom meeting last night. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay. And I believe, Mr. Sullivan, that is still the standing request for
It is.
continuance. Okay.
Yes, it is. And
Thank you.
we also have a request before the New Hampshire DOT on this application. So we're working on that too.
Okay. Good to know. So I would entertain a motion to continue case 19-12 to a date in,
How about January or December anyway?
I haven't thought about December. Our meetings
Once we see-
Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was just going to say, unless we see things, I have no feeling things are freeing up in November here, but you can second guess that. That's why I said December, January.
Right now, we have December 10th and potentially December 17th as our dates in December. I'm just thinking that might, and usually we get a little slower. We do have warrant articles and things to that effect to deal with in November and December. Does the board have a, I'm thinking offhand of December 10th myself, but
Well, as good as any. Also move that we move it to December 10th, unless the applicant has another idea of their own.
No, that would be good. That would be fine.
okay. We have a second on December 10th.
Second,
Okay, motion by Mr. McCaffrey, second by Ms. Betty Smith. Discussion. Hearing none. Susan can do a roll call vote, please.
Betty,
yes.
Al,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you to the board.
Okay, new cases. And unlike last time, we're actually going to open them.
Okay, see you, Deb.
I guess that's some sense of normalcy, or returning to normalcy since March. Okay, first up is 20-5, which is Joseph and Marion Lovely. And the owners, or the applicants, are Jay Christopher and Deborah Whiting, dealing with 178 up Bow Street and 181 Bow Street. I would entertain a motion on completeness.
Motion to accept as complete.
Okay, second.
Al, if that was a second, you're muted.
You're still muted.
Yeah, so apparently when you're in Word, hitting the space bar moves the words and it doesn't unmute you here. I was looking at their application, or James' notes, and so I'll second.
Okay, so I believe that was a motion by Ms. Betty Smith, second by Mr. Al Kreider. Discussion on the finding of completeness. Hearing none, Susan could do a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Joe,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Betty,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay, so I will open the public hearing on case 20-5. Let me get to the right page. Okay. For those members who are with us in the meeting, I will read the abutters list. If you are present, please get my attention somehow, yell. Verbally would be good because I tend to spend a lot of time not looking at the screen. So the abutters list: Paul and John Tudor and Carol Bernazzani. The Tudor Family Revocable Trust. Abigail, Stephen, Nicholas, and Susanna Johnson of Belmont, Mass. Stephen Johnson of Baltimore, Maryland. James and Jennifer Hummel. Shane Harvath. Kenneth and Betty L. Peace. John C. and Linda M. Brissett. Joseph M. and Marion E. Lovely. J. Christopher, and well, that's the applicant. And the surveyor. Okay. And I believe Mr. Whiting is here, and Deborah Whiting is here. Why don't you give us a, no, did we do this last time? Did we do the overview last time? No.
Yeah,
No,
we
that's
did a
right.
preliminary.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I'm gonna get, not everything gets back in my head. It's been a while since we've had an application to open without too much problem
All right.
or changes brought on by COVID-19 and schedule. Why don't you give us an overview of what you want to do?
All right, we want to modify lot 36 to take from lot 58 the 1.44 acres that are on the south side of Bow Street. And the existing lot 58 right now is on both sides of Bow Street, north and south. We want to bring it back to the way it was about 20 years ago and make lot 36 add that 1.44 acres to lot 36, which would bring it to 13.3 acres, and leave lot 58 and bring them down to, I believe, 5.65 or somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yep. Okay. Questions from the board? Questions from town staff?
No question, but I wanted to draw your memories way back to the before times when we started doing an affirmative process change of declaring no regional impact for every application, rather than leaving it to be assumed that because we didn't declare regional impact that there wasn't one. So I'd like to try and get back to that, just as a little best practice thing. So I would suggest that tonight the board make a motion that no regional impact exists for this application.
Okay.
Everything else, yeah, I have put some notes in my staff report. Apart from the oddity of an existing parcel that's on both sides of a street, this is a straightforward boundary line adjustment, and I would suggest a quick turnaround on this. So, keeping to the 2-meeting practice, just in case there are written comments to be submitted for the public hearing, but I would suggest the next available meeting, which is November 12th.
Yep. Okay. So I would entertain a motion of finding no regional impact on this case, 20-5.
So
So moved.
moved.
Okay, so we'll give it to Joe and we'll give Betty the second, since you both spoke at literally the same time.
Not quite. I heard her after me, but that's all right.
You're still going, you get the motion, so. Okay, discussion? Hearing none, Susan can do a roll call vote, please. You're gonna get
Al?
tired of hearing that.
Yes.
Betty,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay. Yep, comments on the staff report? As far as content goes, I'll take care of the public hearing aspect.
It looks pretty straightforward.
Yep,
Bob, if I could add a comment.
sure.
I can recall when this action took place from a former planning board, and I'd just like to say that they really went outside the box to create what may seem a little crazy right now, but at the time seemed like a very innovative approach for the applicants at the time and the property owners to meet what they had hoped to. And it was actually Bernie Waugh, who is an attorney, used to be an attorney for the Municipal Association, who I spoke with at the time and gave a whole history as to why it's possible to merge across a public way. So
Good
it
to know.
does seem like somewhat of an odd situation, but I think the planning board did quite a job back then to accommodate those property owners.
Okay. Good to know. I recognize that name. Okay, I will, as far as the public hearing goes, the four members of the public who are listening in, or for purposes of minutes and record, the board has adopted a policy of conducting public hearings in a split session or over two sessions. We will introduce or open the public hearing on one meeting, continue the case to another meeting to give the public a chance to hear or to respond to this case. Any testimony, well, you're right, we'll hear that. We'll continue this at this time. I'll ask for a motion to continue this case, not quite right yet, to November 12th. The public hearing will remain open. Any new material submitted by the applicant should be provided by 4 p.m. on the Monday, 10 days before the proposed meeting, which would be November 2nd, is the deadline for new materials. Currently, there have been none asked or none requested. Written testimony by the public should be submitted by 4 p.m. on the Tuesday, 2 days before the proposed meeting, which at this time is planned for November 12th. So the deadline for public comment would be 4 p.m. on November 10th.
So moved to continue.
Hang on, Joe.
Oh,
I haven't asked for a motion yet. But hold that
I
thought.
thought you were there, Bob. Sorry.
Not quite. One more letter. At the second meeting, the board would then take any final comments and from abutters and any responses from the applicant and public comment into consideration. At this time, Joe, now I would request a motion to continue this case to public hearing.
Mr. Chair, have you actually opened the public hearing?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did before reading the abutters list.
Okay, I missed it then. I just heard you go straight into the abutters list.
Nope.
Well, so moved to
I made sure to
continue.
do that. Go ahead, Joe, you're fine.
Well, so moved to continue to a date specific. What was the November?
November
November
12th.
12th.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Okay, motion by Mr. McCaffrey, second by Ms. Betty Smith. Discussion on the motion to continue. Hearing none, and Mr. Whiting, you're familiar enough, or that is enough explanation of the process?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, it's a little bit of a change from the years we've been doing it, but it's
The
a little
world
bit,
has changed.
the world has changed, yes, it has. So thank you for your consideration in this. Okay, just Susan, go do a roll call vote, please.
Joe,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Betty,
yes.
Tim,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay, we'll see you on the 12th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is 20-6 Ray Properties LLC. We got this 2 weeks ago. We have the staff report. And I would entertain a motion on completeness.
Motion to accept as complete.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Betty Smith, second by Mr. Tim Jandeber. Discussion on completeness. Hearing none, Susan can do a roll call vote, please.
Hal,
Yes.
Joe,
Who did you say?
Joe?
Joe,
All right.
Okay.
Mm,
Joe?
Joe? Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Tim?
Yes.
Now I forgot. Betty?
Yes.
And Bob. I lost my place.
Did you get Hal?
I think I started with him.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We find the application complete. So I will open case 20-6, Yvette DeVoe and Robert Griggs. You listening, James? Okay. Get to the right page here.
just to ask, is anybody else getting freezes in the transmission? Just little spotty ones, a couple of seconds? Or is it just me?
I think it might just be yours, Joe. Mine's coming in pretty smoothly.
Coming in, okay.
Consistently? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Are you on Wi-Fi, Joe?
Yes, I am.
On your phone?
Yes, and I had to switch it a little while when I started. That's why I was having trouble, and
Okay.
maybe it's acting up again. I don't know. Okay, go ahead.
It's not too bad, but because what we can do for votes, if you don't answer, we can just come back to you
Alrighty, thanks.
if need be. Okay, for members of the public who are involved in the meeting, and for the record, I will read the abutters list. If you are present in the meeting, please get my attention verbally, so I know you're present. CRH Builders LLC, Christopher Quinn of Northwood, the town of Northwood, which would be Mr. Kreider. Okay, and reading that note. Hearing none that we have no voters present. Okay, we will. Do we have a representative of the applicant here tonight? Well, I don't believe we do, but
Is this the Northwood Vet applicant? Sorry.
no, this is not.
This is
You're up
Ray
next.
Properties LLC.
Thank you.
I'm hearing a very muffled series of sounds. I don't know what that is.
That's okay. It might be. I think that might be from the vets group. If you wouldn't, possibly, I don't know for sure. But if you're not involved in this application, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, that might take care of it. Thank you. Okay. Well, we've had a chance to review the information for this application. I guess we can hear them without them being present.
Yeah, so for this one, you have a waiver request that I am not sure is strictly necessary. I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The applicant is requesting to make essentially hand-drawn edits to the existing site plan that we have in the file that was previously hand-drawn. I think that regardless of, the real issue being there isn't a scale bar, it may not be perfectly to scale. So if you'd prefer to be safe and approve the waiver, it's really for being drawn to scale. The one edit that I would request either way is that we at least get some of that title block information written in, just so that the plan that's in the file is clearly labeled as it relates to this case. That's why it's in this folder. Here's the date that I last made, the hand-drawn edits for where the cafe is going, etc. Same comment about regional impact. We would need a motion that no regional impact exists. I have also requested, and Linda said she's spoken to the applicant about receiving a letter revoking the prior subdivision approval that is currently standing for this property, just to get that off of the books and close that case out. Otherwise, the site plan itself is a relatively straightforward minimal impact.
Has there been any indication of outdoor seating or interest of outdoor seating from the applicant?
I did not notice that on the plan, and I have not spoken to the applicant, so I'm not sure. I just wanted to make sure that I brought that to their attention in the staff report, so that if they do want to do that, they can make that edit and get it on the plan. The Board of Selectmen has approved a temporary policy for quick amendments to site plans for outdoor seating that's required by COVID-19 to accommodate restaurants. That policy will be in effect until repealed by the select board, so they can keep it open into next year, into 2022 if they deem it necessary. But I think it's in everybody's interest that if the applicant would like to do that, it's probably easiest just to note it on the plan right now.
So I'm thinking that there are, well, let me bring them up this way, that there's 3 bits of information that could be conveyed to the applicant in their, if we need a title block, that information needs to be added to the plan. If they're doing that and they can generate, if they're modifying the drawing to begin with, if they can add a scale bar, if a scale bar is known or can be determined, if they could do that, that would take care of one thing. If they can't, that depends on the board with the waiver. But I would prefer, let's share your question or request that if they are interested in outdoor seating, that now would be the time to do it. Or make the comments, make that change within 10 days of the next meeting or the next hearing, 10 days prior to the next hearing.
Are we looking for comments at this point, or are you just?
Yes, go ahead. Go right ahead.
Well, I think the scale bar has some value. If this is a hand-drawn plan situation, I recognize that the individual, the line delineation is not necessarily right on as a professional drawing might be, but I think the measurements indicated should have some reflection in a scale bar. There's be some proportionality to the drawing as it relates to real dimensions. I'm not trying to say here that it has to be an engineering drawing, but that's one factor. So I think there should be a scale bar that reflects the reality of the situation. I certainly agree that if you want to have outdoor seating, though, we're going into months here where that's not going to be the most desirable condition. But yeah, I mean, January in Northwood outdoors, take it for what it is. But yeah, if they want it, certainly it should be included in part of their request. But the key thing is I'd like to see some relationship I don't mind non-professional drawings, especially on a small project, if they reflect the actual dimensions, and a scale bar might help to define that.
Well, I think if they have dimensions on the hand-drawn scale of, two of the units are 22 feet, well, the third is closest to Route 4 is 25 feet. I think they can, if that is definitely the case, they could determine a scale from that and write it on, and then it would be taken care of. But the rest of the drawing looks like it was done to some type of scale. It just is not labeled.
Okay.
And we can make that determination on, but because they have requested a hearing or a waiver for a not to scale drawing.
Yeah.
And
As
the
I
board
say,
has,
yeah.
we have in the past accepted, as you pointed out, accepted minimal applications with hand-drawn
Sure.
things. If they've got to modify it as well for a title block, and they can make the scale determination, so much the better. If not, we can consider accepting the waiver. Okay, other comments?
Bob, are we going to discuss the septic, or is that once we open deliberations?
We have opened. We're discussing the application now, so if you want to bring up septic, you can bring up septic.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we do it right. And I see from James' notes that we have a letter from the applicant indicating 300 gallons per day. Does the application include the basis for the state calculation so that the state can confirm that 300 gallons per day is sufficient for the restaurant?
I believe that for that site, there was another restaurant already there.
There has been a restaurant at some point in the life of this building.
Right.
Well, there was a pickle place there, and I know there was Thai takeout food that may or may not be the same as what they're planning, because if they're talking about people sitting down, then I believe the state calculation is different, and that's why I'm asking.
There are definitely different standards. In doing a little bit of Googling to try and figure out how many gallons per day a restaurant, to see if there was a typical measurement. What I was finding was not a gallon per day standard, but a series of gallons per meal or gallons per user standards that ran anywhere from estimating as low as 2 gallons per person to 10 gallons per person, depending on whether it was a high intensity sit down place, something that's going to generate a lot of dishes, or something that's mostly disposable materials and counter service in and out, takeout kind of stuff. So to answer your question, I don't know that there is a definitive standard that 300 gallons necessarily would or would not, and I don't think I have the experience directly to say that the way that they are operating will be any one particular of those. So if that's an additional piece of information you'd like from that septic designer, that you'd like them to issue an opinion about whether or not that 300 gallons per day is sufficient for a cafe, that's something I can convey to the applicant.
I think
Didn't that already, wasn't that already stated in that letter? But
I can read it again. I thought the letter,
ask for the calculation. or how they derived at the sufficiency of it? I mean, they must have calculated how they came up with that statement based on certain criteria given to them by the applicant.
I believe the statement was that the capacity of the system is 300 gallons per day.
Right. They
Oh,
did not say that.
oh, okay.
There's
It
nothing.
doesn't say whether the customer count is going to exceed that or
Well, the
not.
application says specifically Unit 3 will be a 9-person inside dining area. And I'm looking,
To my knowledge,
Wouldn't there
there
be a
has
difference
only been,
between?
there's only been takeout. I think there, at one point, there was a catering. They
Yes.
might have had 1 or 2 tables.
Right.
There was an ice cream place there for years, but it hasn't been that volume of. Certainly that system may also be serving the residents that's on that. It may not be, that may be a separate system, but
Maybe
I know
I
at one point they
believe-
were one and the same.
I believe they shared a well, but they did not share septic.
Oh, okay.
That's my recollection. And looking at the prints, they show a shared water line running between the two, which I remember from the last time we heard this site.
Okay,
But
so Mr. Chair, I've pulled up the letter from Topotech Septic System Design signed by Fred J. Walker. To whom it may concern, the existing business building on the site is serviced by an existing septic system and it provides the approval number. The approval was for 300 gallons per day. This system is adequate for the proposed use of 300 gallons per day. Please allow the applicant to use any information or drawings that I've created for this lot in the process. So,
well,
yeah, I may have read that quickly. The way I'm reading it right now, I'm reading that statement as the proposed use is 300 gallons per day, which matches the system.
okay. Okay.
So James, to clarify, is that for the entire site, the 300 gallons per day?
That's how that's how I'm reading it. My understanding is there isn't a separate system for each of the individual commercial spaces. It's just one that covers the building.
It's the building. It does not, according to the plan, the residents share or has a separate septic.
What say again? Bob, you're saying there's a separate system?
There's a separate
For each?
septic system for the house. There's a house on the site.
Yes, yes.
The 3 adjacent office units have one septic system
Okay.
for
Yes.
themselves in 2 different locations, 2 different tanks.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I just would feel more comfortable if we had a statement from the septic designer that said, not it's acceptable for the proposed use, but the proposed use of X, Y, and Z parameters. In other
The
words,
calculations for how they're arriving at the expected gallons per day for the restaurant.
right, because from that, what you read, James, it's not clear to me what he used as the basis.
Right.
Or whether the basis changed since, the applicant filed. And, it doesn't speak to the 2 other units. It's just not clear. And I think what would be safest for us is a calculation that says,
Essentially, show your work.
this is the application, use these numbers and show your work, yeah.
Can you tell I work at a school during the day?
Yeah.
No, really?
But I think otherwise we run the risk. I mean, Mr. Walker is very good with the design, but I just want to make sure that he was given the parameters that are in our application is really what it comes down to.
It's our due diligence to make sure that the applicant is presenting us with the correct information. We can make the decision that, or we have a statement attesting that from a septic designer that yes, the system can design 300 gallons per day, handle 300 gallons per day, but we don't know how many gallons are to be generated by that use.
I mean, part of what I'm thinking about is I just had a septic system installed at a rental unit, and you know, it's like 600 gallons a day for a little house. So
Depends on the number of bedrooms.
well, we did it for 4.
150 gallons a day for,
Yeah.
that's not surprising.
So 300 gallons a day, sort of.
Well, figure that you're not there all the time as much as you are in the house. And others. Anyway, I don't want to get into septic design. So I'm thinking,
Yeah, well, there's
I
Thai
will
food
convey
or
to the
Mexican
applicant
food.
that the board would be interested to see how the estimate of 300 gallons per day was arrived at.
yes.
Yeah.
As
and
well.
we're not going to. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, let me finish up while we're asking things of the applicant. If they can make a determination of the scale, and if they can add a title block to the drawing. I think those are the 3 things that we're looking for. Or at least I'm looking for. I won't speak for the rest of the board.
I think those are fair points. I was going to make my own little observation that it conceivably could depend on whether it was English food, Mexican food, Thai food, Korean food. But that aside, I think it might be useful to know, what there must be some standard for a sit-down restaurant. It's a small number here. We're talking 9 seats or 9 people. It's 9 seats as I gather, which
Yes.
9 tables, which means more than 9 people, as I would interpret that. And what is there's a standard out there. I don't know what it is for the average situation. And that's what we need to know. I don't know that needs to be nailed down too hard. But
The one thing that that Google provided me is for, I think, Wisconsin, for a per seat was 35 gallons per seat per day for a full service restaurant. But I don't know, I might not have been interpreting that correctly because I didn't look at it. That sounds high to me. But
well, again, that number, did I understand that correctly? He's saying 9 seats or 9 tables, or how is that going?
9 tables.
Okay.
9 seats. Yes, specifically says it's seats.
Is it?
Yes. Because there's no way that even that tiny of a space could hold 9 tables. Figuring a table of 4.
Yeah.
Another thing I read.
So I agree with Hal and whatever. We need a little more zeroing in on what it means to have the 9. It doesn't sound like that much to me, and it may be already sufficient, but it would be good just to know.
I just want to check.
that we're not.
So another website or design spec is talking about guidelines for septic design flow gallons per day. Restaurants per seat is 50 gallons per day. So if I read it right, one said 35, one said 50. I don't know what UWA, let me see if I can figure that out. University of West Alabama. Okay.
Well, let's just leave it up to the people that put their license on the line on this. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, right. I'm just trying to give an idea for people. But if that is correct and they're having 9 seats, in that 35 per day gallons per day is correct, they're right at their limit. If it's 50, they're under. But anyway, that's why exactly is how Mr. Kreider points out, it's septic designer's license, not my ability to do math in my head.
I just would say, I don't know what perspective we need to lend to this. The type of food, if it was a 9-course meal, where there's an elaborate amount of dinnerware that's going back to the kitchen to be washed, and that's what consumes a lot of water, the cleanup and so forth in the restaurant, certainly. I mean, the diners are using the toilet facilities themselves, but I don't know that's where the, so to speak, load is on the system. It's what comes out of the kitchen. So right. I'm just guessing that if it's a light menu, they're not going to consume a lot of water. If it's, like I say, I'm being silly here, but a 9-course meal, then yeah, they would consume a lot of water. My guess is it's going to be on the short side. But maybe it'd be good just to have some perspective on that.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay, I will address the public hearing format as I do for every application we've heard recently. So tonight we have opened a public hearing on this case. Had some feedback from the board, things we'd like to hear. The procedure that the planning board has adopted is that we open the public hearing on one case or one evening, hear any testimony from the board or any members in attendance. And then we continue to a date and time certain with the public hearing still open. New materials submitted by the applicant should be provided by 4 p.m. on the Monday, 10 days before the proposed meeting, which the proposed meeting is intended for November 12th. But we have not formally supposed that, so that would be November 2nd at 4 p.m. Written testimony by the public should be submitted by 4 p.m. on the Tuesday, 2 days before the proposed meeting, which would be 4 p.m. on Tuesday, November 10th. If we continue this to the 12th as planned. At the second meeting, the board would then take any final comments from the abutters and any responses from the applicant, as well as incorporating public comment. At this time, I would entertain a motion to continue case 20-6.
Before you do that, Mr. Chair, did you do the quick motion on regional impact? I don't think we did.
I don't think we did.
So again, I'm recommending no regional impact on this case.
I did the last time. I got half of it so far.
I'll make a motion to the same, no regional impact.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Tim Jandeber. Sorry.
No.
That was Joe
right.
McCaffrey. Sorry.
Give Tim the credit.
Motion by Mr. McCaffrey, second by Ms. Betty Smith. Discussion on no regional impact. Hearing none, Susan can do a roll call vote, please.
Eddie,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Hal,
Yeah.
and Bob.
Yes. Thank you, James, for that. Okay, now Joe, you're up. Or whoever wants to make a motion to continue. I think Joe started.
I don't know if I did, but I will. I'll make that motion and to continue to November 12th, was it?
Correct.
Yes. Yeah, 20-6. I don't know if I have the right.
Correct.
Number
Yes,
there.
that's correct.
Okay.
Second.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. McCaffrey, second by Ms. Betty Smith. Discussion on continuation to November 12th. Hearing none, all those, Susan could do a roll call vote, please.
Hal,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Betty,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next up. is case 20-7. Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hedfeld First New Hampshire Turnpike LLC, Hugh Davis and Nancy Phantom, also known as the Northwood Veterinary Hospital. I would entertain a motion on completeness.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Betty Smith, second by Mr. McCaffrey. Discussion? Susan can do a roll call vote, please.
Betty,
Yes.
Hal,
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay, I will open the public hearing on case 20-7. And for members of the public and for the record, if you have joined us for the meeting and I read your name as an abutter, please speak or say something to get my attention so I know you are present in the meeting. William Coburn of Northwood. Aqua Specialties of Northwood. David Henry of Northwood. The Carr Revocable Trust of Northwood. Okay, there are no abutters present. Okay. We have, I believe, the owners with us.
We're here.
Yep. Why don't you give us an overview of what you want to do? Or send it off to, I believe your builder is also with us.
I'll start and he can jump in.
Okay.
I'll let her go.
Always wise.
So we are looking to put on approximately a 1,500 square foot addition.
Yep.
We have simply outgrown our space. We have been busy for the last couple of years, and we're looking to increase efficiency. There will be no new services, no additional staff. We're not changing our hours. We anticipate the parking for clients and staff to be the same, because really it's just to efficiently service the clients that we have. So just normal, we're just all kind of on top of each other. We need a little more space.
Good problem to have.
Yes, very good problem to have.
Okay. Questions from the board for the applicant or the builder?
Nope, no questions. Just looking forward to your comments.
Okay, thank you. Hal, go ahead.
Um,
Oh, sorry, Joe. Hal had his hand up, but I can't see you.
No, that's right. Yeah, I understand.
I've got sort of a similar question as we had for the restaurant, and that is, how do we document the current level of service? Certainly, you know, we go to your office for our dog, and there is plenty of parking and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not so worried about it. But I also want to think about the maybe sad situation where maybe you sell the business to somebody else, it changes or expands, and then we have no documentation to create the baseline for approving this.
For septic, you're talking, Hal?
Just in general for the business. When we approve a business, we consider the number of parking spaces and we consider a variety of other things. And I don't have a problem with what's there now. It was already approved and it seems to be working just fine. Where I think we run into problems are there's a change in ownership or something else changes. And then you don't have the baseline to compare before and after. And I'm not against doing this. I just want to know how are we going to document it to know what we are using for the baseline and then moving forward.
Well, do I understand correctly, and just to relate to what Hal said, that would, what Hal is concerned about would be a implied change of use. When somebody's going to open another veterinary clinic in the same location, take it over, the parameters would remain the same. And so we really have no concern, it seems to me. But if somebody's going to open a restaurant there, then or whatever, it's going to be a change of use. And wouldn't we then be looking at all the things that you, Hal, are concerned about? Right. I mean, in other words, as long as it remains the same, we don't really have a concern, do we?
That's my understanding. James, go ahead.
So we do have an identified number of employees on the application. The application form identifies 22 employees existing, 22 proposed going forward. So if there was a substantial increase in that, that's something that we can actually track. For parking spaces, this isn't a use that we have listed with a specific standard in the parking regulation. So it's figuring out what's reasonable. I think that a lot of uses like this tend to look at how many employees do you have, that sort of thing. I think again, if we're looking at if there are no new services being proposed, if there are no employees being added, from my perspective as staff, I see no reason to require an increased number of parking spaces to be provided.
Right.
I think that to your question of if things change hands and we need to figure out a way to resolve things, a lot of times those things are tripped up either with a building permit application, if the next owner were to apply for interior renovation, and the building inspector were to look at this site plan and what they were proposing and say, whoa, you're carving off a bunch of spaces for kennels, or you're doing something that is fundamentally different from the site plan that we have, they would kick it over to the board for a change in use application. Or if it were a like for like, but they were operating it in a way that had a much higher strain on the property, complaints that result in code enforcement also frequently bring things in for site plan. So it's the typical circumstance that we have with any site plan. We have what they are doing right now. We know what they are proposing, and if that were to change in a way that wasn't consistent, there are usually enforcement mechanisms that would bring this back in some capacity, and we would resolve it at that point.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that part of it. I'm just worried about, and I think you said it, using the employees. I'm just worried about if a complaint comes up, if you have some of those problems you discussed, how do you go back and what do you use to document what it was approved for? And if you're saying it's the number of employees, I'm happy with that. If you say it's the number of vets that are employed there, I'd be happy with that too. I just want to know how we're going to document it so if a problem does arise, and I don't think we'd have the problem with these folks. It would be if there's some other kind of change. How do you know?
That's how. Well, and it, as James pointed out, it depends on the use that's being proposed. In this case, the applicant said, we have 22 employees now, we have 22 employees going forward. That's the basis for their set of performance. If the use changes to, retail, we have square footage, number of parking spaces, number of employees, all that other fun stuff.
Yeah.
So I think you're covered.
Yeah. Well, what happens if they change to large animals, Bob, and we need to bring trailers in?
Then that's a whole nother.
It's still, there's no change in use.
We'll do more site work.
Change in use.
He doesn't get to retire anytime soon, so don't worry.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not worried about you folks. I'm worried about when things change.
Be careful that we don't require that as a note on your plan. You might really be stuck then.
No more stuck than I already am.
Gotta pay the builder on the other side.
We don't do cows, do you?
Yeah, okay. So, I believe we did regional impact.
No, but
I
Yes.
don't think we did for this one.
For this one, we did.
not for this one.
I don't
Not
When
think-
did we do it? I didn't vote for it.
We just did it for the last one.
We did it for the last one. Okay.
So
For motions,
again,
let's make sure.
I don't believe there's a regional impact here. I just want to make it formal.
I would entertain a motion of no finding a regional impact.
So
So moved.
moved.
Okay, since you both spoke at the same time, we'll
Betty.
see I forget who I gave it to last time. We'll give it
Give
to
it to
Betty.
Betty.
Second by Mr. McCaffrey. Discussion on regional impact. Susan can do a roll call vote, please.
Joe,
Yes. No regional impact. Yes.
Correct.
Betty,
Yes.
Al,
Yes,
Tim,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay. As far as reading over the staff report, double checking that we're covering.
So I wrote
Good.
quite a bit about the waivers on this one. Yeah, our normal practice has been up until now for things that trip one of those criteria and just get kicked up to a minor site plan. We have historically required separate waiver requests for a whole series of the requirements to make the submission a lot more similar to a minimal impact. I think the applicant's suggestion of, can I get a waiver to just submit a minimal impact application, is a heck of a lot simpler. And thinking through it, I don't think there is really a reason why the board can't consider that request. I just wanted to make sure that I was sort of writing through some of my thoughts to put them into the record. So if you are supportive of going the route that the applicant has suggested and submitted under B Roman numeral 1, I have suggested the language for the motion. So a waiver to section Roman 4C regarding minimal impact applications to allow the minimal impact application to apply to a proposed site plan that meets all 14 criteria, but which proposes an expansion of a building. If you are, so you don't need to decide the waiver tonight, but I think I would suggest at least an indication of whether you are willing to act on the waiver as requested, or whether you would prefer to see the longer list that we have typically asked for, simply because that would give me the next 2.5, 3 weeks to work with the applicant to get that full list to you prior to the next hearing.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think, as with the last one, this is relatively straightforward. It's just a matter of whether the board feels comfortable doing something new or not with the waivers.
Let me understand if I can, James, sorry to ask you to repeat part of this again, but so we're with the applicant's request, it's a simple one waiver request versus, as you say, going through our entire list of waiver specifications for minimal impact. Is that
correct? We usually get 2 or 3 applications a year that are like this, where for some reason they need to file a minor instead of a minimal impact site plan. I gave you the list of waivers that we got on one application like that. There were 8 of them. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly how many would apply to this. I'd want to take that time over the next couple of weeks to come up with that list. But frequently there are 5, 6, 7, 8 waivers that the applicants have had to submit for those circumstances. So basically, it's a choice of, do we want to check a bunch of really small boxes, or this would potentially be setting a precedent that, you know, if the intent of granting those waivers is to make things easy on the applicants, that we understand the minor site plan creates a higher burden, it's more work, and we want to accommodate people by lowering the amount of work that goes into that. This would also be lowering the amount of work you have to do to make that request, by giving you a simple one waiver request that checks all of those boxes at once, and kicks you straight into, you know, a hand-drawn site plan or hand-drawn edits to something we already have on file.
So we're passing, so we'd be agreeing to, it's not a single waiver per se, or a single item, but a group that.
The way the applicant has proposed it, it is a single item. The waiver would be, instead of waiving standards of the minor site plan, you would be approving a waiver to the standards of a minimal impact application, to allow that application type to be used for something that meets all 14 items on the checklist, but is proposing some sort of change to the exterior of the building. So instead of half a dozen waivers to minor site plan, we're making one waiver to the minimal impact standard that says, yes, you can just go ahead and submit a minimal impact application.
James, it doesn't mean we can't, as part of our deliberations and consideration of a single waiver, factor in some of those points, or does it?
So some of the examples of things that are waived are, you know, for example, a septic design plan, where typically for the minimal impact, as we just discussed, a letter is sufficient for us. There is explicitly a requirement of the minor site plan that a septic design plan be submitted. So we would need a waiver for that to bump you down to only accepting a letter. The minor site plan requires stamped design plans, stamped by an engineer or a surveyor. So we would need a waiver to bump that down. So I think the way that I would suggest thinking about it instead, if you choose to go this route, would be, just because you are approving a waiver to allow the minimal impact application to be submitted, doesn't mean that you can't ask for more information if you need it in your deliberations.
Right.
So that would mean the minimal impact would be your starting point. And if there are things that you then need to ask for on top of it, you would ask just like you would have any other applicant as part of the public hearing.
It doesn't preclude us from doing that.
Correct.
So if there's one item that maybe we don't feel we are comfortable with, we could ask for that. Otherwise,
yeah, you could ask for that information. You could ask for a note to be added. You could ask for something to be highlighted or redrawn or relabeled on the site plan, any of those.
Yeah, so it doesn't really take away anything as far as I can see. It just makes it a little easier.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, I'm seeing, this is Joe again. I'm seeing that maybe in regard to what Hal just said, and I like the idea of making this a little more efficient at the point of voting. Obviously we can just go and piecemeal the pieces, but of checkoffs. But if some of them require, I think, in this case, and that's why perhaps you're going along with this, James, to some degree, is that it saves added time and expenses on the part of the applicant, for one thing, if they have to get certain other approvals or certifications from somebody, where we already have an existing situation. They're not, especially, it sounds to me like they're not going to be increasing, what do I want to say, load or, can't think of the right word here.
Not changing much.
For instance, yeah, not changing much, but the septic system or anything like that is not going to be increased. They're asking for more space in order to have more working room. And that really, and they're with the same employees or roughly the same employees, seems to me, then they're not really imposing anything on the site. It's just a matter of having more working space. So I see it as advantageous not to require extra stuff that doesn't really improve the situation from our standpoint.
Okay,
Of knowing
so,
anything.
sorry, Joe. Go
No,
ahead.
I'm good with the single. I'm good with
Okay.
James's idea that maybe the single
Okay, so because we,
request.
in terms of, as far as this application, the public hearing aspect of it goes, as I've explained before, the board's moved in COVID-19 era to a 2-meeting hearing. We'll open the hearing on the first evening, continue it to a date and time certain. At that point in time, we have the following deadlines: that if there is information requested of the applicant, where the applicant has more information to supply, that that information would be received by the town at 4 p.m. on Monday, 10 days before the next proposed hearing or meeting, which is to be, the next meeting is proposed to be November 12th. So that would be due by 4 p.m. on November 2nd. And written testimony by the public would be submitted by 4 p.m. on the Tuesday, 2 days before the proposed meeting, which would be 4 p.m. on November 10th. I don't believe we have much requested of the applicant at this point in time. But what Town Planner James Perdine would like is a sense of the board on how we would like to proceed with the waiver, so that he can work with the applicant if we choose to go to deny the waiver or the proposed. No, that's not right. We either give a waiver on the minimal impact, or we give multiple waivers on the minor site plan. I would like a sense of the board how you would like to proceed on that waiver, either one or multiple. However, whoever wants to speak first is fine.
My sense is that I would be willing at this point to make a motion to approve the single waiver.
Well, I'd rather have.
That's my sense.
Okay.
I think I would prefer to hold off on approving either set of the waiver until the end of the public hearing. So either way, I would suggest that approval of either the single or the multiple occur at the next meeting. All I'm looking for is if somebody is going to make us think about, to pardon me putting it bluntly.
I was gonna say, is that a technical term there?
It's a very technical term. If somebody is very much opposed to a single request and would much rather see the longer list, I'd rather know now so that 2 meetings doesn't turn into 3.
I like 1.
Okay. Joe?
Well, I've already said, yeah, 1 is good.
Okay. Tim?
1.
Okay. And I think Betty?
I already said.
Yep, that's what I thought. And I'm leaning toward 1 myself. So
Sounds good
I
to
think
me.
we're heading that way. Okay. Anything else on this as far as comments go from anyone who's involved? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to continue case 20-7 to November 12th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Betty Smith, second by Mr. Tim Jandeber. Discussion? Hearing none, Susan will do a roll call vote, please.
Al,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Betty,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes. Okay, we'll see you on the 12th.
So much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay. On to internal business, which is wetlands.
So I emailed all of you earlier today a draft of what I'm proposing for the Wetland Conservation Overlay District. At this time, I can try to share my screen.
Should be all set for that. Okay.
All right, can you all see that?
No, it can't.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it super small?
It's pretty small.
Super small, especially on a phone.
There, that's
screen,
better.
Is that
That's better.
That's good. Thank you, Jay.
okay? Let me try and get everything. All right. So the purpose section, I am not proposing any changes. Yeah, unless we were making some substantial changes to how the district was supposed to function, I don't see a reason to touch that. For the overlay district boundary, I didn't make any meaningful changes to this. This intro paragraph used to be longer. What I've done is taken the description of prime wetlands out of this introduction paragraph. The methodology is basically the same. The ability for somebody to dispute the delineation is the same. And then I've put the prime wetlands back in here. I've also named the prime wetlands and that overlay or overlapping area with the conservation overlay district as high sensitivity wetlands. Simply because, you know, in the discussions we've had about that overlap, I've had to sort of talk in circles or use various ways to describe that. And I thought it was really helpful just to give it a name. So that, this is what I've proposed for that name. The description of the prime wetlands is the same as what was existing. And then I've updated the language slightly just to fit in here and read a bit easier for that overlapping area with the conservation overlay district. Permitted impacts, this was formerly permitted uses. I've changed a little bit of the language, again, to focus on the word impacts, since uses are, you know, uses of record. Is it commercial? Is it residential, etc. I've added language here that is intended to be, since these uses or impacts are permitted by right, it's intended to be flexible, but still have a little bit of a requirement for people that you're permitted to do these, but you should be as careful as possible, and you should be keeping those impacts to the minimum possible. So theoretically, if somebody went hog wild and just wanted to tear up the wetlands for the sake of the wetlands, there would still be some way to you know, sit down and have a chat about whether that was something that was actually appropriate for one of these permitted impacts. I've made some slight changes to language throughout, again, to change references to uses to refer to impacts instead. Wildlife refuges used to be stranded on its own. I didn't think it made any, or it was particularly unique, so I stuck it in with the rest of this list to cut down on bullet points. Item G, the cutting of vegetation, disturbance and placement or construction of temporary structures or materials as necessary for the removal of invasive species. This is something that came up with the Conservation Commission specifically in relation to those high sensitivity or highly sensitive wetlands. But since I was making changes down there that I'll talk about in a second, I wanted to parallel that up here. Item H was something we spent a little bit of time talking about last time we discussed these, and that was the ability to cross wetlands with a driveway for a single family home or a duplex. In talking through it more with Linda, it sounded like what the original problem that caused this was that basically the drainage ditches or swales along the side of the road were showing up in some wetlands delineations as wetlands, whether it was from the soils or there was standing water in them. So they were identified as surface water that was counted as a wetland. And because this narrow area very close to the road had to be crossed, all of those people had to go for what the ZBA started referring to as ditch variances to be able to cross over that ditch, to put a culvert in and put that driveway through. So these weren't intended to allow somebody to go 100 feet through a jurisdictional wetland in the middle of the property to build on some upland out back. It was specifically for this small impact right up front, next to the road that was needing a lot of permission for a lot of really small things. So I was trying to think about how can we permit those small impacts without having to approve every single one, but still require some level of review if somebody does want a more serious impact to wetlands further into the property. And I have proposed two mechanisms that we can use to do that. So one of those would be a de minimis impact area where we would just set a square foot threshold. And if they're impacting, I've proposed 200 square feet right now, but we can discuss that amount or if this is the right mechanism. So right now, if they were impacting 199 square feet of wetland to put their driveway over, they would be able to do that by right. If they were proposing 201 square feet or more, they would need a special exception for that. The other thing that we could do would be if we want to give people a pass for things that are associated with, detention next to a road, we could limit it to within 100 square feet or some other number of the road itself, and require that review for anything that is, again, in the backland further into the property. Again, I set it at 100 feet right now. We can talk about that number and whether it can go up or down, or you could decide that you only want wetland area and you want me to take out the bit about distance from the road or vice versa, or I could get rid of both of these and leave it as it was. But I wanted to give you some options to consider as we discuss this further. Section.
May I ask, James, before you move on?
Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Just in that previous, your such crossings, so in the middle, such crossings must impact less than 200 square feet of the wetland area. Let's say, for instance, if we were, suppose that's a road surface of some kind, that's, I mean, that's the driveway is the issue. So that's, I'm trying to get a sense of, and what I want to ask you is where the 200 feet number is generated from. I mean,
so a road, a two-lane road is typically 20 feet wide, so you'd be 10 feet long.
That was exactly. Basically my math was, if you're thinking about the point is to get over a ditch, I was thinking about 10 feet as being a fairly wide ditch, and 20 feet wide being a really wide driveway. And that's how I picked 200. If you want to talk about a more scientifically rigorous way of coming up with a better number, I'm sure there are plenty of ways. I just wanted to put a number on paper for discussion purposes, and get the ball rolling.
Sure. I'm not trying to, I don't know if there is a scientific approach to this. I mean, this is a very much a practical matter of situation. So I'm just trying to imagine the situation. And like Bob just said, we've got, if you had a 20-foot driveway, and that's being a nice driveway. I mean, a lot of them are just 1 lane wide as they wander into various properties. But let's say it was 20, so that gives you 10 feet. That may not be, I mean, that'll cover a culvert for sure and a little bit to spare on either side. But I'm just, yeah, I just wonder if that number might be too exact in a sense. Obviously, if you made it 1,000 feet, you're turning it into a whole different kind of concept, I guess. I wouldn't want to see it less than that because I don't see how you manage to cross a typical culvert situation less. So I think the number is not so bad. I'm just trying to think if we don't create an unnecessarily exact situation, if there needs to be a little leeway. That's
Yeah, and there's always going to be, no matter what we would set that number at, I can pretty much guarantee that at some point somebody will be 10 feet over and probably be grumpy about it.
Right.
This doesn't say that if you're at 201 feet, there is no way you can cross that culvert. It just means you have to go in for the special exception, like you would for a larger wetland impact, a different type of wetland impact, a wetland impact in a different place.
Sure, you're indicating that.
Yeah, again, I can move on that number. I'm not going to be too bent out of shape about it. But I think, to your point, there is a next step then of here's what you can do by right because it's assumed to not be that big of a deal. Here's the next level up where maybe somebody should take a look at it and do a little bit of review before you go ahead and start installing.
Okay, I appreciate the extra.
Any other questions?
Nope.
No, so far.
Not for me.
Okay. Setbacks, I have flipped what were sections 4 and 5. And the reason that I did that, since I have uses allowed by special exceptions, I need to change that to impacts. But since the special exception can apply to either the wetland area proper or the setback, and we have applied the same set of criteria for what you need to submit for those special exceptions, I wanted to get all of the rules for what can happen in the wetland and what can happen in the setback on paper first, and then talk about the special exception after that, since it would apply to everything above it. So I bumped setbacks up here. Section A, there is no new language here. This is where we used to have the language about reducing the setback on pre-existing non-conforming small lots. And my takeaway from the last time I discussed this with the board was that you would prefer to see that automatic reduction of setback go away. So that's been deleted from this section. Item B is entirely new. But again, as with that sort of common sense, hey, be smart about what you're doing, keep it to the minimum possible, use best management practices so you don't screw up the wetland or pollute a bunch of stuff. That's the same here, that I'm suggesting you need to use best management practices for erosion control so you don't get a bunch of sediment in the wetland, for any of your other construction stuff so you don't pollute it or erode a bunch of stuff. Just be careful with what you're doing. Item 5 then is and I need to go back and change that to impacts allowed by special exception. This doesn't have a lot of changes. I did, and the two different scenarios for special exception are pretty parallel. The first one is a wetland impact that is necessary for a productive use of land elsewhere on the property. And the second is contemplating actually putting some component of that use or that structure in the wetland. So in this case, I've fleshed out the part about meeting with the Conservation Commission. You still have to meet with them, but I've added that we want their findings in writing. At bare minimum, we would accept the written minutes of the meeting at which it was discussed. If they choose to make more detailed written findings, whether it's a letter just laying out their concerns, whether it's a formal recommendation of approval or denial, we would accept those as well. Number 2 is new language that was copied down from the intro paragraph. Since this is a special exception because they need to cross the wetland for a use that they're otherwise permitted to do elsewhere. This is just saying, show me why you need to cross that wetland for that use. Show your work, as we talked about a couple times tonight. 3, 4, 5, and 6 then have been renumbered, but they are unchanged. And then B is again that looks like there's a typo that I need to fix. Is, you know, the applicant is proposing in some capacity to build a structure within the wetland or the wetland setback in a way that would not otherwise be permitted. So again, I've put the same updates for the Conservation Commission into item 1. Item 2 again has been updated to say, show me why. Why do you need to go into the wetland? Why can't you just move the building a little bit to the right and make it work? I think this is all happening in practice already, or the questions the ZBA are asking are getting it into the record. But I wanted to make it a little bit more explicit and a little bit more formal. Again, the other items have been renumbered but are unchanged. High sensitivity wetlands, just about this entire section is new or expanded. But I wanted to put it all under the name of that increased area so it was easy to find, easy to tell these rules apart from the other rules up top. And we could sort of go through a parallel step-by-step structure. I have added a slight purpose statement to say why we are doing something different and a bit more stringent. The setbacks are 100 feet. So I put a setback section in here just to make that obvious and easy. The current language, I think, is best interpreted as saying the high sensitivity areas are a no cut, no disturb. You can't touch anything in there. So I have written what I think is slightly clearer and more defensible language that is trying to maintain that understanding that this is a no cut, no disturb wetland area proper and setback area. The 2 things that came up in discussing with the Conservation Commission, yeah, those of them that have experience with forestry, with land conservation, with habitat management, brought up that to a layperson's perspective, it may seem like keep it natural, never cut, never disturb is the best thing, but that's not always the case. There are circumstances where you would want to be able to cut and remove vegetation, whether it's to remove invasive species, whether it's for habitat management to maintain a certain type of habitat that benefits a certain type of animal, or general forestry management best practices, clearing downed brush and things like that to prevent wildfires. There are things that you can do that would be classified as disturbance or cutting of vegetation that actually make it more healthy and would be desirable. So this is entirely my language. If there are problems with it, the responsibility is all me. But this was me trying to accommodate that invasive species and that forestry habitat or or wildlife management. In the second case, I would like it to be at least somewhat formal, that there's a plan that's been put together by somebody that they can point to and say, this is what we're doing and why. But otherwise, I think that those activities should be able to occur by right. Generally speaking, in the zoning world, if you want somebody to do something, it needs to be permitted by right. Otherwise, you're just putting barriers in the way. And then rounding out this section, I've added an item C under there recommending that people who are proposing to undertake impacts like this meet with the Conservation Commission and get their feedback. But I am not listing that as a requirement. It's just, hey, they're here to be helpful and they have a lot of knowledge. And then explicitly putting in a relief section, making it clear that any special exception issued under section 4 up here, or as it may be amended in the future, those special exceptions don't apply to the high sensitivity areas. You need to get a variance from the ZBA for impacts that would otherwise not be allowed under here. So that's the outline at a glance. I can keep this up or hop back to a particular section if you have any questions or want to talk through something. Otherwise, I will share this with the Conservation Commission. I think they meet at the beginning of November, so they would have an opportunity to provide comments prior to your next meeting, and we can pick this back up at the workshop on the 12th. So, thoughts?
I have a question, if I can, James.
Yeah.
Point of information, I guess. Just high sensitivity wetlands. There's a formal definition of that somewhere?
I have not added a formal, well, I sort of added a formal definition of high sensitivity wetlands. So it's not in the definitions section right now. I'm not proposing to put it up there, but it is in the delineation section. So this is the overlay district boundaries. And this is where it talks about the documents that a wetlands specialist would use to say this is where the wetlands are. Item C under that is what defines the high sensitivity wetlands. And the definition of them hasn't changed. I've kept that functionally the same as what it currently is in the overlay. I've just given it a name and changed the language a little bit, I think, to make it a little bit clearer and make this a somewhat more formal technical term. So we have something to identify it as when we need to talk about it.
Okay, so there is in the original ordinance, there isn't a form, because I frankly don't know. There's not a formal definition of that term.
We don't use that term currently.
Okay.
We don't use that term currently. It's a term that I made up. I didn't get it from anywhere. It was just, it came to me while I was writing. But the function of those high sensitivity wetlands already exists, and I haven't changed anything about what goes into the wetland areas that play by that set of rules, if that makes sense.
All right. It does. I might, I don't know, I might like to, so if I understand you, you're saying it's the definition or what is meant by it is implied in the concerns of the different elements that you identify in prime wetlands or so forth.
Yep.
Is that right? And so, I guess if we're going to use a term, if I'm getting this, you're not formalizing it as a category. You're saying these are things that have high sensitivity.
Right. So
in other words, it's
right. We effectively have the category already. I've just given it a name so it's usable, and it made more sense than in using the name of that category for the section about that category. But the term is not, you know, pulling from some broader sense in the literature. It's just creating a descriptive term for the purposes of our ordinance. If you would prefer to see that also as a defined term in the definition section, that's really easy to add to this. It's basically you're copying and pasting that somewhere else in the warrant article and saying we're also adding this to the definition section.
Yeah, well, I don't know quite yet. I guess I want to mull on this a little further.
Sure.
Yeah, if we're going to ask people to, you're identifying something here, you're giving it a name, high sensitivity wetlands, in essence.
Yeah, I was just going for what the prime wetlands and the wetlands that overlap with the conservation overlay district had in common, since those are the only two things that go into it. So I was just trying to find a term that sort of fit as an umbrella over those two separate categories that feed into it. If you want a different term, or if you want to wordsmith it, think about it and we can talk about it at the next meeting.
Yeah, not necessarily. I get the sense of what you were trying to do with that, as you're saying. I'm just wondering if it creates people, you know, it's the heading of a section. It shows up in other references. So I don't know if it needs more refinement or delineation or just something. I'm not sure yet. You know, I think I follow what you said you were doing. So, all right, I'll look at, you know, I'm going to look at this further. So thanks.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay.
All right. So timeline-wise, I'll plan to put this back on the agenda for the 12th for a little bit more detailed discussion. At that point, we would hopefully have some comments back from the Conservation Commission. It'll also give me some time to take some time away from this and come back and just do a proofread to catch any of those little typos. I know that some of the numbering is wrong, isn't working with the scheme, but I didn't feel like, you know, fighting with word formatting before I got this out to all of you. Sure. We will want to hold the first public hearing for this in December, ideally. Last year we put it off till January and it cut it kind of tight. So if we are working backwards, that would mean that at one of the November meetings, we would need a motion from you to send this to a public hearing. So if you want to come in on the 12th and think that we can make any final tweaks and send it that night, that's great. Otherwise, we might want to just put it on the next agenda the week later and try and do it then.
Okay. I guess I'd so far, to my recollection of the 12th, we have the 3 cases that we heard tonight on the agenda, and anything new that comes in November.
Yep, and the new items wouldn't be heard. That would just be a staff report night.
Right, right. So theoretically, November 12th might be fairly light. I'm okay with the idea of moving this again on the 12th or getting us closer to final format on the 12th. It looks to be pretty substantially completed to begin with. There's nothing that raised my hackles.
Okay.
But I'm
Well,
not.
I can also, something else I can do then is I could maybe start working on the version that shows the inline changes for what was added, what was removed. Unless we want to just do this as a complete repeal and replace in case it gets muddy, and just say we're getting rid of the existing section 6A and replacing it with the proposed section 6A. There are some sections that will have no changes right now. There are some that are going to be entirely new and a little bit messy. But I can take a look, and I can take a look at how it's turning out while I'm doing that. And we can talk about that next time.
Yep.
Can I ask in this?
Go ahead.
So if there's some finalized, so there's a finalized version, this is going to go before the town for a vote. Let's say we approve whatever revision. How soon would that be available to be read by any town voters? And in a format of this is the old, this is the replace. And however, as you just said, James, I mean, it may be, you could have one complete, you could have the old and the complete new. I think there's some value, maybe there's a third version that might be of value, frankly, to people. I mean, we're hashing over this to some degree. The average person in town is not going to do that. But it might be useful to see the old, the new, and an in-between version that has kind of what you've accomplished here, James, and that is, and I like the idea of a different color formatting, the pink or
yeah,
what I'm
so
saying.
Normally I sort of manually make the edits to make it look like changes have been tracked. So I'll do something like bold and in blue is something that's new, and red strike through is something that's deleted from the old.
Yep.
So I can do that for the next meeting. And then from there, if you if you made the motion to send this to a public hearing, Linda or Susan could probably put it on the website the next day, or as soon as I made any final changes that you want to make. So, once we have that document, we can get it or make it available to the public pretty quickly. If people are already watching us tonight or are watching this recording at some point in the future, hello, people of the future.
Yeah,
they can always send me an email, planner@northwoodnh.org, and I'd be happy to provide a copy of the document if they want to take a look. We also, just because we have put this on for a public hearing doesn't mean it can't change. So, say we hold the first public hearing on I think it was December 10th is the workshop. At that meeting, we'll take comments from the public. Say somebody makes a really good point about something we forgot to add. At that point, we would be able to make those edits and change the document, provided we then hold another public hearing on the final document before sending it to the warrant. So that's why we always like to leave ourselves room for those two public hearings.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, and correct me or suggest otherwise. I'm trying to puzzle this out in the sense of anybody coming upon this not inadvertently, that's unlikely, I guess, but certainly they have some interest in this. They have the old ordinance there. They have the new proposed ordinance. Is there what I'm getting at or thinking about? Is there a middle ground that would make it clear how the change is going on? This one's a little more difficult to me than a typical one that we have proposed, or typical changes we proposed in past years. Often there's a line, 2 or 3, a paragraph, a deletion, and that's it. Here we have quite an array, and you're reordering a number of the subsections. And that, to me, it's going to prove. It seems to me it's going to prove daunting to more than a few people that are really interested anyway. I mean, the person's not interested doesn't care one way or the other. So I'm just trying to get at maybe a middle representation. If I'm being clear, I'm not sure.
So I think you are, and I think what I would suggest. So in your reading through it over the next couple of weeks, all of the comments on the side, I think, are sort of getting at some of that information that you're asking about in that sort of middle ground of providing that justification.
Yes, I think that's good.
I also, in past years, have always put a staff comment section where I explain the justification for why we are making any change at all, why we settled on the one change that we are deciding to propose, sort of how we got to where we got. So I would suggest that I can work on the document that shows those track changes. I can try and keep as many of those sidebar comments in the document as possible so that they're still visible in line as people are reading, to help them figure things out. And then once you've seen that handout, if you think there are things that are still unclear or need to be added or explained, tell me in November and I'll add them.
Yeah, okay, I think that's a good suggestion. By incorporating or keeping in a middle, let's call it a middle document that kind of transitions between the old and the new. Because your sidebar comments are good, and if those are there for others to see in some form, that's good, I think. Yeah.
Yep. So we won't be able to keep that on the warrant. The warrant should be the cleaned out version, but we would still be able to have that handout for people who are trying to understand what's on the warrant.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Why don't we figure on bringing this back up in November?
Another item of internal business was just our meeting schedule for the rest of the year. Typically, we have proposed instead of the 4th Thursday, since it always conflicts with Thanksgiving and typically is right on or around Christmas in December, going to the 3rd Thursday instead. It seems like everybody's fine with that since we put items on for the 19th, but just to make that explicit, and we have occasionally canceled either that 2nd or that 3rd meeting if we had no business to discuss.
Correct.
And then I believe Linda had an item that she wanted to discuss, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, am I on?
You are now.
Oh, okay. Well, my laptop stopped and I'm on my phone now. I just checking. I haven't spoken since I got on it. I just want to bring to the board's attention that regarding RSA 674-41, the state statute relative to building permits being issued on roads that are not on a plat signed by the planning board, or prior to that, the Board of Selectmen, when they had authority to sign plats.
Yep.
as you're aware, in the past, the statute does call for review and comment by the planning board when these particular cases come up. Our current building inspector, as the two previous ones, have been very, very concerned, as I have, about the guidelines that were adopted back about 3 years ago by the Board of Selectmen, which calls for very, very restrictive, what do I want to say, scenarios or criteria for processing those applications. Scott LaCroix, our current building inspector, and I have had several discussions. We spoke to the town administrator, and we are scheduled to be on the selectmen's agenda next Tuesday night. We are going to speak to the selectmen to propose some changes to those guidelines, specifically regarding who would be required on those Class 6 and private roads to need that special level of appeal from that regulation. Currently, the regulation that was passed several years ago includes any change to a residence that changes the size and shape of the structure would need to provide an engineered plan from a licensed engineer in the state of New Hampshire for the upgrade of the road in order to make any changes. So basically, I'll give you an example. One came in today. Somebody who has been living on a lot has a mobile home. All the zoning is met because it's just a change to a residential structure. Even though the lot's non-conforming, our attorney says if all other zoning requirements are met, then we must, in fact, allow for an expansion of a residential use. The way the statute guidelines are written now, the person could not take that mobile home out and either replace it with one of a different size, build a 2-bedroom ranch. The same would hold true based on the language within that for adding a dormer to a residential structure. That's how restrictive it is. It cannot change the size or shape of any residential structure. So that's part of the problem that has been causing a lot of discontent by the public. And as you all know, we have many private and Class 6 roads. Mm-hmm. So we've looked at that, and we're going forward with some suggested changes, which are all within the authority of the Board of Selectmen to decide whether they're comfortable or not with those. But one of the things that occurred in the past, because these applications still have to come per the statute, review and comment by the planning board. The planning board has stated on numerous occasions that they didn't really feel, either had no comment and was not interested in knowing whether someone with a residence on a private road was expanding 6 feet out to get an additional space in their kitchen or whatever the case may be. It adds time and effort to your meetings. So basically what we've done is come up with different sections of
milkshake
construction or expansion or changes in use that would have different layers of process that a person would have to go through.
Right.
And so now that we're more or less getting back on track, and after COVID, the responsibility will come back onto the planning board to review each and I spoke with our attorney, and she said every single one of these must be heard by the planning board.
Right.
She said the only way around that would be a change in the legislation. Well, I do give our building inspector credit. He said, well, is it possible that rather than the planning board reviewing all these cases, what about having the technical review committee, which consists of the building inspector, either James or myself, the fire department, and the police chief, to determine whether or not, to review and comment back to the selectmen, as those folks would be more knowledgeable about the roads themselves, and the road agent. I left him out. So what I'm asking is, and I don't want an answer, I'm just throwing this out for a decision of the board later on, after the selectmen have looked at it and made their decision on it, is whether or not the planning board would be comfortable going the route of having the technical review assume that responsibility for the planning board. I asked the attorney today, and she said, very interesting. There's no reason not to. That it certainly was legal, as the technical review committee is part of the subcommittee of the planning board, and that the planning board could delegate to them that responsibility. So I just wanted to make you aware that we are looking to recommend changes and to ask the planning board to think about whether they would be comfortable delegating that authority to that subcommittee. And that would have to be a vote at a future meeting.
Linda, did Laura say what that mechanism for delegating would be? Would it just be a motion of the planning board that this is how we're going to do it from now on? Or would that need to be somewhere in, I guess, either zoning or rules and procedures? I'm not sure.
No, she didn't say, but she said she felt that it was definitely legally defendable. And if we need to get a clarification on that, I mean, we could hold a public hearing if you felt it rose to that level.
I think I would at least feel most comfortable if she could say like what it would take to do it. I'm more thinking about like where that would live in writing, that we have delegated that authority to staff.
Oh, absolutely. I think that that certainly is a good point. I think right now, because everything, this only came up this afternoon, so we didn't get into it very deep, but I just wanted to more or less bring this up to the planning board. We can look at the details of it, and certainly, you and I can sit down and figure out those type of details should
my real concern, I guess, is that it doesn't seem to me that it would be appropriate to put that in site plan or subdivision, because there are plenty of 674 or 41 things that don't fall under either of those categories. So then my concern is, does this need to be in the zoning ordinance? Which if it does,
I don't
then we
think
need to
Laura
get writing.
was indicating that it needed to be done that way. She more or less said, and she did say, quite honestly, that many communities are not following the statute and even requiring or following through on either approving them or having the planning board review them. So she was comfortable with the idea that the planning board could delegate that authority to their subcommittee, but I don't know if it needs to be other than a formal vote, but I can certainly check that out. You know, you've raised a good point there, but I don't know if it needs to be to the level that the voters would need to have to approve. It's a state statute that gives authority to the planning board to review and comment. I mean, we've been through this with many of them, and the planning board says, so why are we seeing this? And
Yep. Yeah.
Well,
and most of it is all residential. And just so you know, we have the ones that would come to the planning board that we have separated out for planning board to review would be new lot development, residential, conversion of seasonal to year round, if there are, and this is all subject to the Board of Selectmen liking the ones that we've separated out, that have a higher level of requirements, seasonal to year-round conversion, and there has to be year-round occupied homes beyond it, and any non-residential use would still have to go to the planning board, and it would still, those three uses would all still require an engineered plan showing that the road met the emergency lane standards. We're just trying to eliminate, when you tell somebody that in order to get their, we had one on Northwood Lake, for example, was on a private road, a year-round home, and the doorway, they wanted to enlarge the height of the doorway in the porch to go in, and they would essentially, based on the guidelines, have to provide an engineered plan of the road in order
And
to make that
potentially
change.
upgrade the road for substandard portions,
Right.
because this is for any building permit.
Any building permit that is on a private or class 6 road that is not on a plan signed by the planning board.
Yep.
So it is it's been, I can't tell you how many people have walked away. And the other thing that we know is that what it does is, rather than encourage people to make positive changes, upgrades to their property, and such, is that they either get overwhelmed by the process and don't do anything, or they wait and then they go ahead and do it without a permit. So it's just a way to make the process more streamlined for the very small residential projects, and still maintain a level of review by both the planning board and the Board of Selectmen for those scenarios where it would be important. And the real reason behind the statute is access to the property. It's not about whether the roof is 22 feet high or 26 feet high, or whether it's a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. It's whether or not emergency vehicles can get to the site. And that's really the whole issue. And so many other things are handled through the zoning ordinance that, it seems like just another very restrictive layer of process that people would go through on a simple building permit. So that's the plan, and I just wanted to make the planning board aware. I think it would be much more effective. I don't know if, because I haven't had a chance to talk with our planner, I don't know if he would want to be involved in that process. We could, it could be done in-house without, with the other people on the technical review who are definitely more understanding, such as the police chief, the fire chief, and the road agent, with some input from planning staff. with the building inspector on these type of small projects.
I'm not sure. Can I ask
Go ahead, Joe.
something, Bob? I'm not fully clear. I kind of understand, I think, part of the dilemma that Linda's bringing up. And there are, I mean, the example of the doorway or something. I hardly see where we should be involved in that. But I think if the writing of a previous ordinance is far too complicated or far too particular in its nickel and diming everything, I see a need, and I certainly could see going along with a need for cleaning that up. I'm just wondering if there's does this broach into an area whereby larger improvements, let's call them, are going to be done, and in fact, it's going to turn into an added bedroom, creating a year-round facility where it clearly was not before on this Class 6 road. I'm just wondering if this doesn't, and I haven't seen, and you haven't said, Linda, the final writing of this, but if it doesn't take away some of the reasonable concern that the planning board is supposed to have about inappropriate properties on too small or inadequate or whatever lot situations.
That has no bearing on this issue. It's
Right.
strictly access to the site. And that's where it's become an issue in the past. It's almost been written to be like a second layer of a zoning ordinance without calling it that.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem lies. The zoning ordinance already addresses, non-conforming lots, lot development, and this would not exempt seasonal to year-round new lot development or non-residential uses on a private or Class 6 road. The planning board would still be involved in that. And when I say in the review of that, and the planning board's role is fairly small here. It's
Right.
the Board of Selectmen who ultimately have full say on this. What they decide as to the criteria, the only role the planning board essentially has is to review and comment to the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Yeah.
And as an aside, if someone is aggrieved by and doesn't want to go to the Board of Selectmen to get the building permit based on the criteria they've set, they can go to the zoning board. And so when you make the criteria so restrictive, people can just go directly to the zoning board, and the zoning board may give a different answer than the selectmen, and we've had that happen before. So I think the entire guidelines, that's why we felt that they need to be reviewed, and we're asking the selectmen to do that. And once that comes through, then the only question for the planning board is, do you want to delegate the smaller items to a technical review committee?
Yeah. I follow, I guess.
No, okay, so Linda's not asking us to do anything aside from keep it in mind. So anything else for you to bring up tonight?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. That's
I have one very quick thing.
Sure, go ahead.
I would like to acknowledge with gratitude all the work that Linda and Susan and James do to keep things rolling.
Yes, agreed. Actually, we do have one more thing that we need to do. And that is talk about the calendar. We've already scheduled stuff for November 19th. So the premise by doing so is that we are not meeting on Thanksgiving, the 26th, but we should address December at the same time. So the idea would be for November that we have meetings on the 12th and the 19th and not the 26th. In December, it would be the 10th and the 17th.
Not Christmas Eve?
As opposed to Christmas Eve. Not that necessarily many people are going to be traveling over Christmas, who knows, but
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of meeting on Christmas Eve myself. Someone else can share if they want to. I'll state my absence already. Any issues with changing the schedule that way? We do not, I don't believe we have anything scheduled for the 17th of December currently. And in the past, if we have not had reasons to meet on the second meeting, that has been canceled, but I'm not there yet. Do we need a motion to that effect?
Sounds good with me.
Anybody have any problems with doing that? Can we do this informally?
No problem.
Okay. So let's plan it that way. Then we'll meet on the 12th and the 19th and the 10th and the 17th. Okay. And I'll add that to my calendar.
I'll say those dates.
So November 12th and 19th. And then December 10th and 17th.
Thank you.
So instead of Christmas Eve. So, okay. And I guess we have one last item of business to take care of.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. I was going to say, I have to ask for a second.
Yeah, geez,
What's wrong with you people? Okay. Anybody? We will take a unanimous vote at this point in time. Thank you. Aye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
We're adjourned at 9:45. 9:45.
At
Thank
all.
you.
Everybody. Thank you.